We're on page 134 of the red book. Anybody found it in the black book yet? 31? 221. We're on page 221. Dr. Livesey just ran off out of the stockade. Out of the stockade. And Jim and Long John Silver are still on this side of the fence. You should have your maps out, ready to go. Because what did Long John Silver say he has to do in order to keep Jim alive? Find the treasure. So we're going to need a treasure map today. All right? So, on page 134, or 221, it starts off exactly where we left off. Long John Silver leans over to Jim and says, "Jim, if I saved your life, you saved mine, and I'll not forget it. I seen the doctor waving you to run for it. With a tail of my eye, I did. And I seen you say no. As plain as hearing, Jim, that's one to you. This is the first clean of hope I had since the attack failed. And I owe it to you. And now, Jim, we're to go in this here treasure hunt with sealed orders too, and I don't like it. And you and me must stick close together, back to back like, and we'll save our necks, in spite of fate and fortune. We're in this together, buddy. You and me. All right? Thank you for not running off, because you saved my life by sticking with me. If you had run off, they'd have killed me." Just then a man hailed us from the fire that breakfast was ready, and we were soon seated here and there about the sand over biscuit and fried junk. They had lit a fire fit to roast an ox. It had now grown so hot that they could only approach it from the windward, and even there not without precaution. They had built such a huge fire. Have you ever done that? You can't even, I can't even get close. I was like, we're trying to cook lunch, not have a bonfire. All right? In the same wasteful spirit, they had cooked, I suppose, 3 times more than we could eat. Well, there's 7 of us. Let's cook 72 cheeseburgers. One of them, with an empty laugh, threw what was left into the fire, which blazed and roared again over this unusual fuel. I never in my life saw men so careless of the morrow. Hand to mouth is the only word that can describe their way of doing. And what with wasted food and sleeping sentries, though they were bold enough for a brush and be done with it, I could see their entire unfitness for anything like a prolonged campaign. There's no way that if they keep acting like this, they could ever do anything effectively. They're good fighters, but they're just morons. They don't think about what they do, what's going to happen in the long run. And we're starting to see how Long John's picture of pirates is where they're bumbling, they fight each other, they don't really think very well. We saw that from the very beginning with Pew trying to give him orders to find Flint's Fist, find Jim. We can go get all the money we want if we can just find this thing. And all of the silly things that have happened along the way. Israel Hands and O'Brien getting into a fight to the death for no real reason whatsoever. We're seeing even more and more the type of pirates that Robert Louis Stevenson has developed. And then you see him in the movies that we watch so often. Even Silver, eating away with Captain Flint upon his shoulder, had not a word of blame for their recklessness. And this the more surprising for me, for I thought he had never shown himself so cunning as he did then. Long John just ignores all this wastefulness because he's just too smart. He knew the right thing to say. "Aye, mates, it's lucky you have barbecue to think for you with his here head. I got what I wanted, I did. Sure enough, they have the ship. Where they have it, I don't know yet. But once we hit the treasure, we'll have to jump about and find out. And then, mates, us that has the boats, I reckon, has the upper hand." Oh, wait a minute. Jim did tell Dr. Livesey where maybe he wasn't so far away that he couldn't hear. He just heard where the big ship was. Not 100% sure where it is. Thus, he kept running on with his mouth full of the hot bacon. And he restored their hope and confidence. And I, more than suspect, repaired his own at the same time. I'm actually helping Long John and the pirates. And what oh no. Yeah.
He's bad again.
Yeah, I believe Long John we may not know where Long John's at right now, but it seems like he's in the bad guy court. "As for hostage, that's his last talk, I guess, with them he loves so dear. I got my piece of news, and thank ye to him for that, but it's over and done. I'll take him in a line when we go treasure hunting, for we'll keep him like so much gold in case of accidents, you mark. And in the meantime, once we get the ship and treasure boat and off to sea like jolly companions, why, then we'll talk Mr. Hawkins over, we will, and we'll give him his share to be sure for all his kindness. Wait a minute. What do you guys think of what Long John's doing with his pirates? What were you going to say, Tiff?
I was gonna say maybe he's just for himself.
Maybe there should be like a triangle that fits Long John Silver in there, and whatever's going to help him to survive, huh? Good. What is your thought,
He's
Ken?
gonna get the boat. First of all, he has to get the boat to get the treasure. Alright. He has to get the treasure to put on the boat, take back. Or he can find the treasure, it doesn't matter. But he's gonna get Dr. Livesey over, and while he's not looking, he's gonna like kill him or something.
Right, he could just take everybody out now. He knows where the boat probably is.
Probably not gonna take Jim out though.
But he's going to keep Jim. And what did he say he's going to do with Jim? He's going to put a line on him. Oh, Dr. Livesey said keep him close. So I'll wrap a rope around him so he can't run off. And I'll hold on to him like a prisoner.
What?
Right now, so he's going to keep Jim with him with a rope wrapped around Jim.
No.
That's what he just said. I'll have a line around him. It's no wonder the men were in good humor now. For my part, I was horribly cast down. I'm feeling terrible, Brown. I'm feeling terrible. I'm actually I really am a hostage. I thought he just told me that thanks for saving his life. I gave him my word, and now here I am, and I'm actually a hostage. He's going to have a rope around me. For my part, I was horribly cast down. Should the scheme he had now sketched prove feasible, Silver, already doubly a traitor, would not hesitate to adopt it. He still had a foot in either camp, and then there was no doubt he would prefer wealth and freedom with the pirates to a bare escape from hanging, which was the best he had hoped for on our side. Which one do you think he's going to choose? Oh, please help me to not maybe possibly hang and die with you guys, or hey guys, I told you we could get the treasure, let's go kill everybody. Which one do you think he's going to choose? Got a question?
He's like, thanks for saving my life, but I'm still probably gonna kill you all.
Yeah. You know, you're perfect. Thanks for keeping me going in both categories.
I'm still gonna kill you.
Nay, and if things even fell out, and he was forced to keep his faith with Dr. Livesey, if he did have to follow his truce that he made with me, what danger lay before us? What a moment would that be when the suspicions of his followers turned to certainty, and he and I should have to fight for dear life. He a cripple and I a boy against 5 strong and active seamen. What if he's like, oh well, I guess I am going to side with you, Jim. Okay, now we got to fight off these 5 guys. How are we going to pull this off? Either way, it looks bad for Jim.
Aren't they all wounded?
Add to this double apprehension the mystery that's still hung over the behavior of my friends, their unexplained desertion of the stockade, their inexplicable cession or give up of the chart, and harder still to understand the doctor's last warning to Silver, look out for squalls when you find it, and you will readily believe how little taste I found in my breakfast, and with how uneasy a heart I set forth behind my captors on the quest for treasure. I'm not all excited for Treasure Island. Remember when he said he got there, and from that point on he hated Treasure Island? We're starting to see why. Kill the guy, here I am in this trap. My friends have ditched me. This is not as cool. I thought it was going to be this fun little, hey, look, X marks the spot, let's go find it. No.
He has a giant X in the center.
Yeah, there's a giant X. If we just had a helicopter, we could land on it. Danny?
I think Long John Silver is just saying that stuff with putting a line on James so that the pirates don't want to kill him.
Right, he's playing it. He's got it played so perfectly that he still can go either way. Everything he says to the pirates. Now, he doesn't tell the pirates everything he knows about the firefight that's supposed to come. Right? So look out for squalls or firefights. But what does that mean? How are we supposed? Are we supposed to get shot at?
Natives
Or
starting it.
so? What does this mean?
It's sad, they-
Well, the other men. Oh wait, we made a curious figure. Had anyone been there to see us? All in soiled sailor clothes, and all but me, armed to the teeth. Silver had 2 guns slung about it, one behind and one in the front, besides the great cutlass about his waist, and a pistol in each pocket of his square-tailed coat. He's got 4 guns and a sword.
Oh, well, that.
To complete his strange appearance, Captain Flint sat perched on his shoulder and gabbling odds and ends of purposeless sea talk. Starboard, go to starboard, pieces of eight, pieces of eight. Now you start to get that picture of pirates with the parrot on their shoulder. I had a line about my waist, or rope, and followed obediently after the sea cook, who held the loose end of the rope, now in his free hand, now between his powerful teeth. For all the world, I was led like a dancing bear. Not really sure. I haven't seen a dancing bear with a rope around its waist. But. The other men were variously burdened. Some carrying picks and shovels, for that had been the very first necessity they brought ashore from the Hispaniola. Others laden with pork, bread, and brandy for the midday meal. All the stores, I observed, came from our stock, and I could see the truth of Silver's words the night before. Had he not struck a bargain with the doctor, he and his mutineers, deserted by the ship, must have been driven to subsist on clear water and the proceeds of their hunting. If they wouldn't have made the deal with Dr. Livesey, they would have been starving to death. Water would have been little to their taste. A sailor is not usually a good shot, and besides all that, when they were so short of eatables, it was not likely they would be very flush of powder. They wouldn't have been able to survive very long if Long John hadn't. He was telling the truth to the pirates. I saved your lives by working things out with Dr. Livesey. Well, thus equipped, we all set out. Even the fellow with the broken head, who certainly should have kept in shadow, and straggled one after another to the beach, where the 2 gigs had waited for us. Even these bore a trace of drunken folly of the pirates, one in a broken thwart, and both in their muddied and unbaled condition. Both were to be carried along with us for the sake of safety, and so, with our numbers divided between them, we set forth upon the bosom of the anchorage. So they went down, picked up the jolly boats, dragged them along the water, and a lot like Lewis and Clark, how they forded the Missouri River all the way up from Iowa, all the way to Montana. That's how they carried their supplies. These guys are going to carry a lot of their supplies by pulling the boats along with them up the river. And they're going to go until they can find a nice landing spot, which eventually is up here. This open spot up here. All right? So they go a little bit to the northeast of the island, where yours is, or of Spyglass. Where yours is, it doesn't matter. I have mine trying to be somewhat geographically accurate. As we pulled over, there was some discussion on the chart. The Red Cross was, of course, far too large to be a guide, and the terms of the note on the back, as you will hear, admitted of some ambiguity. They ran, the reader may remember, thus, if you remember when they read it, it says, "Tall trees, Spyglass shoulder, bearing a point to the north of northeast. Skeleton Island, east-southeast, and by east, 10 feet. What are some things in there that we recognize? What are some things in those descriptions that we recognize? Mario, anything? Nothing in there we've ever heard in this book or in our lives before? What's something?
Tall tree.
Tall tree. You heard of a tall tree before, Mario? All right, so there's one thing. Anything else? Yeah.
Spyglass.
Spyglass, yeah, this big hill. This big mountain here. The volcano. Anything else?
Maybe.
We know feet. Okay.
The whole thing was said at the beginning of the book, like whenever
Like the town.
Captain died and went and searched thing, and what's his name read it.
Right, but they didn't tell us the coordinates of the island. But doesn't it also say Skeleton Island in the directions? We know Skeleton Island, right? So, we can get an idea
Skeleton Island.
that when you get to a point when Skeleton Island is east, southeast, when it's down here, you should be able to go, you should be able to look northeast at the shoulder here. So we've got to actually have some things that we're now familiar with to be able to figure things out. A tall tree, right, is thus the principal mark. We're looking for a tall tree. Now right before us, the anchorage was bounded by a plateau from 200 to 300 feet high, adjoined on the north by a sloping shoulder of the Spyglass, and rising again towards the south into the rough, cliffy eminence called the Mizzenmast Hill. The top of the plateau is dotted thickly with pines of varying height. There's pine trees all over the place. So a tree doesn't help us. There's big trees everywhere. Every here and there, one of a different species rose 40 or 50 feet clear above its neighbors. And which of these was the particular tall tree of Captain Flint could only be decided on the spot and by the readings of the compass. You really can't tell which tree. Yet, although that was the case, every man on board the boats had picked the favorite of his own ere we were halfway over, Long John alone shrugging his shoulders and bidding them wait till they were there. Hey, just shut up and wait. We can't tell which tree it is. We just got to keep following the directions. We got to get to a point where Skeleton Island is to the south-southeast, and we're up near the edge of Spyglass Shoulder. That means the side of Spyglass Hill. We pulled easily by Silver's directions, not to weary the hands prematurely. Don't wear everybody out. And after quite a long passage, landed at the mouth of a second river, which runs down a woody cleft of Spyglass. Thence, bending to our left, we began to ascend the slope towards the plateau. So we come all the way up here, and we start climbing up to Spyglass Hill. At first, and this is great imagery here of if you've ever climbed from a river up the side of a mountain. This is actually a great description here, imagery. At the first outset, heavy, miry ground and a matted, marish vegetation greatly delayed our progress. It's really thick with trees and mud. But little by little, the hill began to steepen and become stony underfoot, and the wood to change its character and to grow in more open order. Instead of being really thick with trees, it's now open. It's now open. And you can start to see a little bit further, maybe 30 feet between trees instead of 10. Thickets of green, it was indeed most pleasant portion of the island that we were now approaching. A heavy scented broom and many flowering shrubs had also taken place of the grass. Thickets of green nutmeg trees were dotted here and there with the red columns, and the broad show of the pines. The first mingled their spice with the aroma of the others. The air, besides, was fresh and stirring, and this, under the sheer sunbeams, was wonderful refreshment to our senses. If you're ever going to hike in the mountains, nothing better than a nice big breath of fresh air. The party spread itself around, a fan in shape, shouting and leaping to and from. About the center, a good way behind the rest, Silver and I followed. I tethered my rope. I was tethered by my rope, he plowing with deep pants among the sliding gravel. From time to time, indeed, I had to lend him a hand, or he must have missed his footing and fallen backwards down the hill. So we've got guys over here to the left, guy up here, guy in front, guys over here to the right, and Long John and Jim are following behind. Jimmy, a couple times, had to catch Long John because he's climbing, hiking the mountain with a crutch and one leg. We had thus proceeded for about half a mile when we were approaching the brow of the plateau, when a man upon the farthest left began to cry aloud as if in terror. Ah! 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 Shout after shout came from him, and the others began to rush in his direction. "You can't find the treasure," said Morgan, hurrying past us from the right. "Well, let's clean the top." Indeed, as we found when we reached the spot as well, it was something very different. At the foot of a pretty big pine, and involved in a green creeper or ivy, which had even partly lifted some of the smaller boxes, a human skeleton lay, with a few shreds of clothing on the ground. I believe a chill struck for a moment to every heart. "He was a seaman," said George Merry, who was bolder than the rest. He had gone up close, was examining the rags of clothes. "Leastways, this is good sea cloth." "Aye, aye," said Silver. "Like enough. You wouldn't look to find a bishop here, I reckon. But what sort of way is it for the bones are on? Take nature. Don't be dumb, Mary. We're not going to find a pastor or a priest up here. Of course it's a sailor. But it's weird to me is he's laying weird. Doesn't look like somebody who died." Indeed, on second glance, it seemed impossible to fancy or imagine that the body was in a natural position. But for some disarray, the work perhaps of the birds that had fed upon him, or of the slow-growing creeper that had gradually enveloped his remains, the man lay perfectly straight, his feet pointing in one direction, his hands raised above his head like a diver's, pointed directly in the opposite. There's a body. I mean, if you imagine somebody who dies, they fall on the ground and they're like this. But this guy, both legs are pointing. He's laying flat on the ground, legs pointing this way, and his arms are doing this, laying flat out on the ground. "Take a notion into my old numbskull," observed Silver. Here's a compass. Here's a tip-top of Scout Island, sticking out just like a tooth. Take a bearing with you along the line of them bones." It was done. The body pointed straight in the direction of the island, and the compass read duly east, southeast by east. So let's do that. He took out a compass. I was like, look at this. This skeleton, he's got his legs down here. He's got a body here. And his arm, here's his head, and his arms are pointing that way.
I knew he was a compass. I figured it was.
"I thought so!" cried the cook. "This here's a pointer. Right up there's our line for the Pole Star and the Jolly Dollars, by thunder. If it don't make me cold inside to think of Flint. This is one of his jokes and no mistake. Oh yeah, remember? He went on the island. 6 guys and him. What did he do to all 6? Him and 6 was alone here. He killed every man. And this one he hauled here and laid down by compass, all shiver my timbers. Their long bones, and their hair's yellow. Oh, that be Allardyce. You mind Allardyce, Tom Morgan? Aye, I mind him. He owed me money, he did. He took my knife ashore with him. It's like, yeah, I remember Allardyce. He went on shore, and he had just owed me money from a betting game we had done last night. He still owes me money. And he took my knife on shore with him that day that Captain Flint killed him. Speaking of knives, how did we find his lying around? Flint wasn't a man to pick a seaman's pocket, and the birds, I guess, would leave it be. Or the pounds, that's true. There ain't a thing left. That ain't a thing left here. Still feeling around among the bones. Not a copper coin to it, or a baccy box. They don't look natural to me. No, by gum, it don't. No natural. Oh, not nice, says you. Great guns, messmates, but if Flint was living, this would be a hot spot for you and me. 6 they were, and 6 we are. And bones is what they are now. I saw him dead with these here deadlights, said Morgan. Billy took me in. There he lay with penny pieces on his eyes. Oh, I'm starting to remember what happened when Captain Flint died. Did he? Sure enough, he's dead and gone, said the fellow with the bandage. But if ever a spirit walked, it would be Flint's. Dear on, but he died bad, did Flint. Aye, that he did. Now he raged, and now he hollered for rum, and now he's saying 15 men. With only songmates, and I tell you true, I never rightly liked it, heard since. It was been hot, and the window was open, and I hear that old song a coming out as clear, and the death pall upon the man already. Come, start his talk, he's dead. Don't walk, and he don't walk, that I know. Leastways he don't walk by day. You may later that. Carrot, killer cat. Put your head full of the balloons. Ah. You ever be at a slumber party? Somebody tells a scary story, or maybe you watch a scary movie together, and then as soon as you turn it off and you're in a dark room by yourself, and you go,
Yes. All the time.
I'm not moving.
Just stand at the door to make sure it's safe.
All these guys are like, oh, here's Allardyce. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he killed him hand to hand. Cold blood. And it's like, and then Long John's like, hey, don't worry. Even if his ghost is here, he only comes out at night, right? You only have to be scared at night. It's like,
Based on movies.
right, just like those of us who will only will cover our foot with the sheet so that the monster doesn't get us, right?
I do that.
Right? It's like, oh, my foot's gonna, oh, no, it's okay, you can't get it.
You feel so safe under looking like.
What?
nothing can
It's
get you.
like the monster's like, oh man, he got it under the sheets.
That was like they were making a parody. He's like, oh, he's
Oh.
under a blanket. I'm just kidding. It
We started certainly, but in spite of the hot sun and the staring daylight, the pirates no longer ran together, ran separate, and shouting through the wood, they kept side by side with bated breath. The terror of the dead buccaneer had fallen on their spirits. Partly, chapter 32, the treasure hunt. Voice among the trees, partly from the damping influence of this alarm, partly to rest. Silver and the sick folk, the whole party, sat down as soon as they had gained the brow of the ascent. They've been walking quiet, nobody talking anymore. And now they're just tired. They decide to sit down. More beautiful imagery here. If you've ever walked up a mountain and you're by yourself or with one other person, and everybody's just quiet, and you look out. It says, the plateau being somewhat tilted towards the west, the spot on which we had paused command a wide prospect on either hand. Before us, over the treetops, we beheld the Cape of Woods fringed with surf. Behind, we not only looked down upon the anchorage in Skeleton Island, but saw clear across the Spit and the eastern lowlands, a great field of open sea upon the east. Sheer above us rose the spyglass, here dotted with single pines, there black with precipices. There was no sound but that of the distant breakers, mounting from all around, the chirp of countless insects in the brush. Not a man, not a sail upon the sea. The very largeness of the view increased the sense of solitude. They've got the dead body and the thought of Flint haunting them, keeping them quiet. And then they have, go ahead and answer. And then they have, being up on this island, all by themselves, it quiets things down. Not yet.
Can we borrow your pen?
No, not yet. And so that's kind of the picture we need to have, is that you just realize how lonely you are on this island with nobody else around. And Silver sat as he took certain bearings with his compass. Here are 3 tall trees, about the right line from Skeleton Island. Spyglass shoulder, I take it, means that low point there. It's child play to find the stuff now. I have half a mind to die first. It's like, hey, if you follow that line, you can see there's 3 trees. All 3 big trees, you can see that it's being pointed to by that pointer, if we stay on that line. I don't feel sharp, Ralph Morgan. Thinking of Flint. I think murder has done me. I think I'm too freaked out, guys. I'm too freaked out. Oh, well, said Silver. You just praised your stars he's dead. He were an ugly devil, and blue in the face too. That was how the rum took him. Blue. Well, I reckon he was blue. That's a true word. Ever since they'd found the skeleton upon this train of thought, they'd spoken lower and lower. They'd almost got to the whispering by now, so that the sound of their talk hardly interrupted the silence of the wood. All of a sudden, out of the middle of the trees in front of us, a thin, trembling voice struck up with a well-known air, and words. 15
man on a dead man's chest. Yellow and a butter rum.
I've never seen more dreadfully affected pirates than the pirates. The color went from their faces like enchantment. Some leaped to their feet. Some clawed hold of others. Morgan groveled on the ground. "It's Flint Bay!" The song had stopped as suddenly as it began. Broke off, you would have said, in the middle of a note, as though someone has laid his hand upon the singer's mouth. Coming so far through the clear, sunny atmosphere among the green treetops, thought it had sounded airily and sweetly, and the effect on my companions was the stranger you can kind of imagine. It's kind of like Scooby-Doo jumping into Shaggy's arms and like, "Lights!" "Come," said Scylla, struggling with his ashen lips to get the word out. "This won't do. Stand by to go about. This is a rum start. I can't name the voice, but it's someone scoring like someone that's flesh and blood, and you might write it that." His courage had come back as he spoke, some of the color to his face along with it. Already the others had begun to lend an ear to this encouragement, and were coming a little to themselves. And when the same voice broke out again, not this time singing, but in a faint distant hail that echoed yet fainter among the clefts of the spyglass,
Darby McGraw.
it wailed, for that was the word that best described the sound of
Darby McGraw. Darby McGraw. Darby McGraw. Fetch out to the road, Darby.
the buccaneers remained rooted to the ground, their eyes starting from their heads. Long after the voice had died away, they still stared in silence, dreadfully before them. "That fixes it, let's go!" They was his last words above board. Dick, of course, has his Bible out, praying about, "Oh, dear God, dear Jesus, please help me." He'd been well brought up, and Dick, before he came to see him,
Yeah, it's not gonna help you. You tore the Bible.
that's right. Still, Silver was unconquered. I could hear his teeth rattle in his head. But he had not yet surrendered. Nobody here. Nobody in this here island ever heard of Darby. Not one but us that's here. And then making a great effort. "Shipmates, I'm here to get that stuff. I will not be beat by man nor devil. I was never feared of Flint in his life, and by the powers I'll face him dead. There's 700,000 pounds, not a quarter of a mile from here. When did ever a gentleman of fortune show his stern to that much dollars? We're a boozy old seaman with a blue mug, and him dead too. There's over $5 million up the hill. Who cares if somebody's coming after us?" But there was no sign of reawakening courage in his followers. Rather, indeed, of growing terror at the irreverence of the words. "But lay there, John! Don't you cross a spirit!" And the rest were all too terrified to reply. They would have run away separately had they dared, but fear kept them together, and kept them close by John as if daring help them. "Oh, here's the... Shut up, man, you're going to tick off the spirit. But hey, at least if I'm close enough to you, they won't get me." He, on his part, had pretty well fought the weakness down. "Spirit? Well, maybe. But there's one thing not clear to me, there was an echo. Now, no man had ever seen a spirit with a shadow. Well, and what's he doing with an echo to him, I should like to know. That ain't in nature, surely." It's like, it's not even acting like a ghost voice, because, ghosts don't have shadows, and so ghosts clearly shouldn't have an echo. What? And Jim's just standing there like, "You guys are weird." This argument seemed weak enough to me, but you can never tell what will affect the superstitious. And to my wonder, George Mary was greatly relieved. "Well, that's sir. You've a head upon your shoulders, John, and no mistake. Well, shipmates, this here crew's on the wrong tack, I do believe. Come to think of it, it was like that's Flint's voice, I grant you. But not just so clear like anyway, after all. It was like somebody else's voice now. It was like boy, the powers been gone. Aye, so it were." Springing to his bent gun, "It were. It don't make much odds now, do it? Ben's not here in the body any more than Flint." But the older hands greeted this remark with scorn. Nobody minds Ben Gunn. Dead or alive, nobody minds him. Even if he were here as a ghost. Who cares about that weirdo? He doesn't bother us. He's a ghost or alive. Ignore him." It's extraordinary how their spirits had returned. and now the natural color had revived in their faces. Soon they were chatting together with intervals of listening. And not long after, hearing no further sound, they shouldered the tools and set forth again. Mary walking first with Silver's compass to keep them on the right line with Skeleton Island. He had said the truth. Dead or alive, nobody minded Ben Gunn. Once they figured out it was Ben Gunn's voice, who cares?
Oh well.
Dick still had his Bible and was looking around him when he went with fearful glances, but he found no sympathy with Silver, and he even joked with him. Told you, you spoiled your Bible. If that ain't no good to swear by, what do you suppose the Spirit will give for it? Not that. And he snapped his fingers, halting a moment for his crutch. But Dick was not to be comforted. Indeed, it was soon plain to me that the lad was falling sick, hastened by heat, exhaustion, and the shock of the alarm. The fever predicted by Dr. Livesey was evidently growing swiftly and higher. The guy's starting to go cuckoo-la-choo with the fight with the fever, with the malaria. It was fine open walking here. Upon the summit, our way a little down the hill, for, as I have said, the plateau tilted toward the west. The pines, great and small, grew wide apart, and even between the clumps of nutmeg and azalea, wide open spaces baked in the hot sunshine. Striking as we did, pretty near northwest across the island, we drew on one hand, even nearer the shoulder of the spyglass. We're going northwest. We're getting closer. And on the other, looked ever wider over that western bay where I had once tossed and trembled in the coracle. And high enough now, he can even see up here where the goat boat got crushed and sunk. Remember we did ... It's up here. Actually, I don't think I ever had us sail this in and park it. I never put it on there. Sorry. It's supposed to have the coracle sunk up there. Well, the first of the tall trees was reached, and by the bearing, proved, no, that's the wrong one. So was true with the second, it's the wrong one. But the third nearly rose 200 feet into the air above a clump of underwood, a giant of a vegetable, with a red column as big as a cottage, and a wide shadow around in which a company could have maneuvered. It was conspicuous far to see, both on the east and west, and might have been entered as a sailing mark upon the chart. It's such a huge tree, it's like you could probably use it, and you could see it from the ocean, and be like, hey, see that one big mountain with that tall tree on it? Like, now that we know what we're looking for, man, you could have seen it the whole time. But it was not its size that now impressed my companions. It was the knowledge that 700,000 pounds in gold lay somewhere buried in its spreading shadow. They thought of money as they drew nearer, swallowed up their previous terrors. Their eyes burned in their heads. Their feet grew speedier and lighter. Their whole soul was bound up in that fortune, that whole lifetime of extravagance and pleasure that lay waiting there for each of them. Silver hobbled, grunting on his crutch. His nostrils stood out and quivered. He cursed like a madman with the flies landed on his hot, shiny countenance. He plucked furiously at the line that held me to him, and from time to time turned his eyes upon me with a deadly look. Certainly he took no pains to hide his thoughts, and certainly I read them like print. In the immediate nearness of the gold, all else had been forgotten. His promise, the doctor's warning, were both things of the past. I could not doubt that he hoped to seize upon the treasure, find and board the Hispaniola under cover of night, cut every honest throat about the island, and sail away as he had first intended, laden with crimes and riches. Shaken as I was at these alarms, it was hard for me to keep up with the rapid pace of the treasure hunters. Now and again I stumbled, and it was then that Silver plucked so roughly at the rope and launched at me his murderous glances. Dick, who had dropped behind us and now brought up the rear, was babbling himself both prayers and curses as his fever kept rising. This also added to my wretchedness, as to crown all, I was haunted by the thought of the tragedy that had once been acted on the plateau, when that ungodly buccaneer with the blue face, he who died at Savannah, singing and shouting for drink, had there with his own hand cut down his 6 accomplices. This grove, that was now so peaceful, must then have rung with cries, I thought. And even with the thought I could believe, I heard its ringing still.
We're now at the margin of the thicket. There's all these trees at the base of this giant tree. And we're here, and we've got to cut through, or we're going to come up to that. It's about 100 yards away. "How's it, mates? All together!" shouted Mary, and the foremost broke out into a run. And then, suddenly, not 10 yards further, we beheld him stop. A low cry rose. Silver doubled his pace. "Oh!" as they heard digging away with the foot of his crutch like one possessed. And the next moment, he and I came to a dead halt. Before us was a great excavation. Not very recent, for the sides had fallen in. Grass had sprouted at the bottom. In this were the shaft of a broken pickaxe in two, and the boards of several packing cases strewn around. One of the boards I saw branded with a hot iron was the name Walrus, Flint's ship. All was clear to probation. The cash had been found and rifled. The 700,000 pounds were gone.